All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. We're really excited to have our first supervisor professional development event of the semester. And today we have Abby Anderson and Kristen Young to present to us about maximizing your different work styles with both your working learners and coworkers and everything. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to them to present.
I'll go first. My name is Kristen Young, and I am the Assistant Director in Leadership and Workforce Development. And if you're wondering what that is, that's a unit within the Central Human Resources Office, and I do this for a living.
And
Abby?
good morning, everybody. Again, Abby Anderson, a Program Coordinator Senior with WorkPlus, and excited to see you all joining us this morning.
All right, so before we get started, before we even give an agenda, we would love to hear from you. What have you noticed in your working learners that might seem like it's a different personality or a different way of doing things, a different way of communicating? Have you ever noticed that your working learners don't do things the way you do, which is natural, right? At work, that's what happens. That's why we call it work. Otherwise, we call it friendship. So we're at work, we're hanging out with people. What have you noticed? What's different about their behavior? Like, are they more detail-oriented than you? Are you more detail-oriented than them? What have you guys noticed? And we're a small group. You can put it in the chat or take yourself off of mute.
I'll go first, Kristen, if you don't mind.
I don't.
One thing that I've noticed with honestly, more so than not with my working learners, is they prefer me not to email them if I have tasks or requests, because to them, they said that emails feel like they're in trouble and it feels too professional for them if it's just me asking for tasks. So they've asked me to either Slack it to them or put it on their task boards that we use. And so to me, I thought that was interesting because I was like, oh, I never would have thought of it that way, but good to know that you all would prefer me not to email you requests or tasks.
I have a student employee, a working learner, I guess. And she's like, I need it on a Google Doc or something. Don't just send me little chunks of information on email. That drives me crazy. And I'm like, but that's how I like to get the information. So once she told me that, then I started using the Google Doc, and actually it's more efficient. What else have you guys noticed?
I see we had someone put in the chat to Kristen that typically the working learners don't respond as quickly as we might think or that we would ourselves.
That's interesting.
So maybe different priorities and how they are prioritizing different tasks, maybe.
What about socializing? Does anybody have a working learner who just wants to talk all the time?
I have the opposite. My worker learners are very quiet. And I'm a very social person, and that's how I engage. And so it's very interesting to have the opposite. And I was also going to comment, I was a working learner right before COVID. I graduated in spring of 2019 ASU as a working learner. And I think it feels from my just experience that the students are a lot more stressed out.
Yes. And that's true. I've seen all the recent news articles and studies are saying Generation Z, which is our current working learners, are to the max, worried about money, worried about health, and mental health is, front and center right now. That's interesting. What else is in the chat that I'm missing?
Oh, there's just one. Stephanie had said that she sees her students are responding really quickly, much more quickly than staff typically do, but she also said they use Teams to communicate. So again, finding a field that works best for them. Taylor, I saw you came off of mute. Would you like to share something too?
Yeah, I'm in a new position, so I'm learning my new working learners, but in my previous position, I had a team of 4. Well, 6 really, but 4 that I directly supervised, and they were across the board, all very different. And that was interesting. And so, Kristen, it's actually interesting. You once showed us the chart of like more people oriented to task oriented. And I forget the other access, but we tried that when we first started as a group. And I think that was really helpful because it showed us like who was a more social bunch, who was kind of more quiet and reserved. And it helped us really work together and communicate better as a team. That was interesting.
I just want you guys to know I paid Taylor to say that because I have that graph with me today. So Abby, should we get to, unless I'm missing any other?
Nope, I think we are all good. We can go ahead and look at the agenda. So as we just mentioned, Kristen's going to get into a little bit more on the social styles model, kind of reflecting what Taylor just introduced to us. We'll look at those graphics a little bit. We're also going to discuss styles when we're stressed, when our working learners or colleagues are stressed, and then get into judgment and perception and reflecting, are we being a little judgy? Are we, taking a step back first? And then also looking at strategies for working across styles. And then action steps, we will be emailing you all in a follow-up email after today, giving you some action steps for you and your working learners if you'd like.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to go over that very graph that Taylor was speaking about. It's sometimes referred to as the social styles model. It can also be, I mean, you've heard of personality assessments. This one is not an assessment because we're just going to look at some different ways of operating in the office at work and decide where you fall on these scales and where your working learner falls. So it looks a little bit like this, and we need to start with, it's a formula. So we start with how assertive someone might be. Some people are more wait and see what happens. Other people are more jump in, right? If you walk up to an elevator, are you the first one to push the button? Or do you kind of, if there's someone else there, you're like, are they going to push the button? There's just different levels of assertiveness. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong. You add on top of that, whether people are focused on tasks a lot or on people a lot, or somewhere in between. There's also in-betweens. Excuse me. And you put that together and we basically get positive intent. What does that mean? That means nobody comes to work saying, I'm going to be a jerk today. I'm going to do whatever I can to frustrate my supervisor. No, I mean, maybe 1% of the world does that, but most of our working learners intend to do a good job. They intend to help us and do the things that we need to get done in our units. So this is the scale that Taylor was referring to. We'll start with task focused versus people focused. And it sounds a lot like what it is. I, for one, am task focused. So when I am in the office, I just go straight to my desk. I log in, I see what's on my to-do list for that day. And I actually sometimes have to stop and remember there are people around me and be like, oh, hi, good morning. I'm just not as zoned in on the fact there are other humans around me. I'm all about the tasks. Then there are the people. And if you work with a working learner like this, you really notice. They come in on a Monday or log into a Zoom and hey, what'd you do over the weekend? I went to do this. How's your mom? Did you get a new dog? And it's just the social. And they're more interested in the social aspects. Doesn't mean they don't want to do the work, but they focus on the social. And I think that's what Skylar was referring to, that he's a little bit more on the chatty side. Work is for talking, where some of us are like, no, work is not for talking. Work is for work. And then the other scale is passive versus quote aggressive. Sometimes people don't like these terms. Sometimes they feel like, oh, that's associated with something bad. No, it's not. But it is how it might come across. I worked with someone who was very assertive. And to me, being not so assertive, it looked aggressive. Instead of, could you please hand me that pen? It kind of came out like, hand me the pen. And to me, that's, I wasn't raised that way. And I would definitely have tried to make that sound much more polite. So it felt aggressive. But to her, that's how you get work done. She's very task focused and fast paced. So that's another way of looking at it. If you're wondering if you're more assertive or a passive, how fast paced are you? Do you need to get stuff done, or are you on the chiller side? Like, do you go on vacation with an agenda of something to do every single day of every moment of the vacation? Or are you like me, where you just want to wake up and decide what happens? So I'm more on the passive side. I kind of let life come at me, whereas other people are want to be in control of their time. So they're more fast paced as a result of that. So where do you fall? Let's take a look at the different quadrants. And then we'll also be, as we go through this, think about your working learners. Where do you think they would fall? So, and all of them are positive intents. So there's 4 quadrants here, depending on where you think you fall. There's get it done, get it right, get along, and get appreciated. I do get controversy on the get appreciated one. People in that category are like, that's not what it is. It's not attention seeking. I want the world to know all the positive things that I'm bringing to the team. And I was like, okay, so how do I express that? I asked them and they're like, it's not appreciated. It's notice me. I'm like, okay, notice you in a good way for all the things that you're adding to the team. All right, so if you're in this quadrant, if you're in the get it done quadrant, this is probably President Crow, if I had to guess. He's all about the task and fast. Honestly, also because he probably just doesn't have time, right? So he just says, give me the pen or do this. And there's no politeness around it. So people have said to me, President Crow can seem very, intimidating because of the way he communicates when he's all business. That's part of his job also. But he can also be very charismatic when he wants to be. So are you in this category? Are you come on, folks, get the meeting started. We don't need icebreakers. Let's get down to business. Those are the get it done people. And we need those people in the world. We need them to keep us on task. Then there's the get it right people. I think this is my quadrant. I tend to slow down and check all the T's and the I's, and I'm looking for commas, and I'm a bit of it becomes a little perfectionistic at times, which makes me slower to get stuff done. But when I get it done, it's right. So that's a positive intent. I'm bringing rightness to the team. Just this morning, someone emailed me something. They're like, "Can you proofread this?" That's because they know I'm gonna scrutinize it. It's just my natural tendency. So what about your working learners as we're going through these? Are you thinking about where they might lie? Get along. This is a very people-oriented, slower paced type of quadrant. These people often become kind of like the counselor of the team. The working learner wants to listen to what's going on with you and want to support you. They want people to get along around them. They're very concerned about relationships in the office or in the team. Are we leaving someone out? They're constantly thinking about how everyone's interacting and if it's positive. And if it's not, that really concerns them. They're going to want to get on that and help smooth over those relationships. We need these people on our teams. Thank goodness we have them noticing, those two aren't getting along. Let me go talk to them and see if I can help sort this out. The counselors of the office. And last but not least, get appreciated. Very, very fast paced, almost overwhelmingly so for those of us like me who are not in this quadrant. Super social, telling you everything they've ever heard or learned on earth. They walk through the door and they tell you about an article they just read, or they have a lot of ideas. Does anyone have a working learner like this where they're constantly like, oh, we should try this. I think we should do this. Great to have on a team because the fresh ideas, the getting attention to what the work is that you're doing can be really useful thing to have. So where do you guys think you fall? Anybody want to come off a mute and say, I think I know which quadrant I'm in, and tell us why.
I will. I'm definitely the get along type. I am very people focused. I'm very concerned. I'm significantly older, like as old as most of the parents of my working learners. So I really have a tendency to mother them and make sure that everybody is taken care of and, doing what they need to be doing, but making sure that their social emotional needs are also being met, that they're not too stressed out, that they're getting along well with one another. It's definitely my quadrant.
That's awesome. So I need you on my team. I would love to have you on my team. So here are some examples. Abby, did you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading, Stephanie had thrown in there, Kristen, I don't know if you saw in the chat with the graphic, she was saying that she feels more on the aggressive end, but she thinks it needs to be more of a smiley face and not so much of the aggressive face, I guess. But she even said that she's had problems with people thinking that she was angry when she's just being more task focused and trying to get things moving along. So I could definitely see how you're not angry, you just want to get the tasks done. Absolutely. But yeah, so further thinking, as Kristen was saying, and walking us through those graphs, trying to reflect on not only yourself, but thinking of your working learners and the different styles they have. I just wanted to see, again, further examples if you all had wanted to share any. But again, and Taylor, I'm going to kind of use you as an example, using those quadrants and stuff as, Taylor just said she's in a new position and has new working learners. She could definitely use those quadrants to get to know her new working learners that she has, or, maybe somebody that has been supervising the same working learners for a longer time. You can use that just to get to know your working learners better if you haven't taken those different assessments with each other or learning each other's communication styles, again, just to further know your team.
Yeah,
So, yes, go ahead, Kristen.
I'm just gonna say, just show them the quadrants. You guys can have a copy of these slides and just show them the quadrants and let them think about it for a little bit, especially if they're on the more passive side. They're not going to jump and say, oh, I'm this. Some people need time, so give it to them and say, hey, tomorrow, let's look at this and talk about it and see where you're at. And I liked the comment about people think I'm angry because I'm more aggressive, and it should be a smiley face. I know. I actually worked with someone like that. We got into what I considered an argument. I went home, thought about it all night, like, how that was rude. Why did she say that? And I was getting all upset. So the next day I approached her and I was like, listen, I don't think that was cool what you said. And that person was like, what are you talking about? We were just having a conversation. So to me, what felt like an argument to the person who was more get it done was just about the work. It wasn't personal. And she was surprised that I was upset. She had no idea that she had done something to upset me. So that really opened my eyes to the fact that before I make a judgment that they're being mean to me, and maybe I need to think, is it just a different style? And that could have saved me a sleepless night, that's for sure.
But I think absolutely, if you are going to take the quadrants and look at them with your working learners, I would definitely start with yourself and explaining to your working learners where you lie, and kind of like Kristen's saying, explaining why you see yourself in that space. I think if we start the conversation, it's going to make our working learners feel more comfortable. And again, think about your location. If you are someone that, might work in a cubicle like myself, I will look for, if a colleague is out of office, borrow their office, or, find a space at the library, something to be able to have a more private conversation, again, just to make our working learners feel safe and like in a trusted environment, right? Versus an open cube. Skylar, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, is there like an assessment that folks can use to like kind of gauge that, where they fall in the quadrants?
I do have one, Abby. I'll send it to you, and you could share it with
Perfect.
these
Yeah.
folks.
Awesome. Thank you so
We'll
much.
send that in the follow-up email.
Thank you.
Okay, so now just a brief conversation about remembering that these are positive intents, right? All of these styles are trying to get the work done. They just do it in a different way. But when we get a little stressed, which working learners have a lot of going on in their lives, they can get stressed too. So can our colleagues, so can we. It turns into a little bit more like this. So the intent remains positive, but the behavior becomes a little more extreme. So for example, when I'm stressed, I start freaking out about the details and I kind of become a perfectionist. For example, someone handed me a document for something we were doing the next day. And instead of saying, thank you, I appreciate you getting that done, the first thing out of my mouth was, that's the wrong font, right? That was the wrong thing to say. And it was a student employee. So I felt bad and I did apologize later. But that's where I go. I'm in perfectionist zone when I'm stressed. And then there's the get it done people. They take over, they take control, they start barking orders because they need to get it done and they're under pressure. Then the get along people start approval seeking when they're stressed. Does everyone like me? Is it okay? Is everyone getting along? I'm really worried about you. The approval and the need for people to like each other becomes almost overwhelming. And it can be a little in the way of getting things done, depending on your point of view, right? Depending on which quadrant you're in. And then last, on the get appreciated side, the real cheerleaders of the office can turn into attention hounds. And I worked with someone like this, and she came in one day, she had a lot going on, and she was like, and I have this and I have that. And she was very dramatic with her hands, and her voice was really high, pitched and loud. And so I thought to myself, what can I do to help her in this moment? And I went, yeah, you're right. We got so much going on. It's a stressful time, but we're going to make it. And I animated myself and I gave her back that energy and that attention that she needed. It super helped. She was like, thank you, Kristen. It's not my normal behavior to do all that, but I did it because I know that's what she needed in that moment. And it really, really worked. So thinking about yourself, thinking about your working learners, have you seen any of these behaviors? Did I miss something in the chat? All right, we can go move forward. Just wanted to point out that this is what happens when we get stressed out, that these positive intents are still there, which is something important to remember. They're still there, but the behavior gets a little out of control, I guess, in all of the quadrants. So how would you fill in this sentence? And this has to do with how we perceive other people's behavior. So we assess others based on their what, and we assess ourselves based on our what.
We assess others based on their actions or behaviors, but ourselves based on our intents or thoughts.
A+, Skylar. A+, you passed the test. Yes, that is absolutely true. It's a psychological phenomenon called fundamental attribution error, if you ever want to look it up. And I'll give you my classic example of this. If you're driving on the freeway and someone cuts you off to jump over into the exit ramp to get off the freeway, and you probably think some choice words. You're like, that person's stupid. What were they on their phone? Were they not paying attention? We judge them based on that action. They just cut us off and they got off the freeway. But if it's us, we're driving along, we're a little lost in thought and realizing we're about to miss our exit. We cut someone else off. We take that ramp. And what do? We're like, sorry, I almost missed the ramp. Oops. We don't say to ourselves, oh, I'm a terrible driver. I shouldn't have been distracted. Some of us do. But for the most part, we attribute bad things in other people to be something that's their core being. Like, that person is a jerk. But when we do it, we have an external reason. Well, it was raining. That's why I was late. It was raining. It's not because I'm a bad person. So what does this have to do with styles? It has to do with how we perceive people and the fact that we need to stop and think, am I falling for this psychological thing that we do as human beings? And if I am, maybe I need to take a second and reassess that person's behavior, not from this perspective of that behavior makes them a bad person. It's just that behavior is different than mine. How can I understand it? So I'm sure you've seen this in any presentation you've ever been to on human behavior. People are like icebergs, right? Because all you see on the top is the behaviors, and you have no idea what's underneath it. It could be the value that they're putting onto that work that they're doing. It could be they're not motivated because they have something else going on in their life at that time. For example, when someone cuts me off on the freeway, I like to think to myself, that's a pediatric cardiologist going to save a child's life. That's why they had to cut me off. That feels a lot better for my day than thinking, what a jerk. So we don't know what's going on underneath. Abby, did you want to talk a little bit about being a supervisor of a working learner from this perspective?
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring an example, something that I've personally experienced with my students. One of our working learners is our graphic designer, and so he's doing all of the graphics you see on our webpage, our events page. He helps with our social media, any of our flyers, does a wonderful job. However, there was one day, I wouldn't even say that his work looked rushed, but he was making comments about how, well, this could have been better. I could have done this different. This should be here. And I was like, okay, for starters, I'm not seeing that because this looks great to my non-graphic design eye, right? Like, you are being very perfectionist on yourself, as Kristen has said with herself. But, so then I just took the second to be like, what's going on? Are you okay? Because, like, again, your work is to my standards, you are meeting expectations, but you're being really hard on yourself. Well, he explained, stressed with classes. He was trying to get his own personal brand done for his class and was stressing on that. But, again, just taking that time to ask what's going on. Are you okay? And then when he was explaining that, he has time built in his schedule for Work Plus, which again can be working in the pathway, attending any of our professional development events, or taking just time for yourself and your professional development, whether that's through different online modules or whatnot. But, so he took his Work Plus time to just focus on his personal brand and try to get himself set for after he graduates and whatnot. So after that, he sent me a Slack message. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that. Like, took a huge weight off my shoulder. I don't have to worry about that tonight. Now I can focus on my classwork. And so again, I could see that he was under stress, even though the work he was presenting was well, but I could tell internal conflict with himself. But again, just taking the time to talk with him and see if there was anything I could help do. And there sure was, but I wasn't sure if anybody else had examples or have noticed, again, just the tip of the iceberg. I could just see a little bit, but to take the time and initiative to further discuss. Because again, like Kristen said, we only see what's on the surface. So taking the time to step back and do a personal check-in. It doesn't always have to be task focused with our working learners. And if not, that's totally fine.
Oh, I was so hoping someone would share an example of something they had noticed with the working learner that was the behavior was a little off. And so you discovered that there was something underneath.
I will share an example. I think it's hard to kind of share examples in this because maybe it feels like throwing somebody under the bus too, especially because they're not here in the room. But I had recently a working learner who was struggling with getting to work on time. And we had multiple discussions, and she was able to, and to me, Although I understood that there was something probably underlying that was causing that issue. You know, it's easy as humans to kind of get into that mindset of like, oh my gosh, this person is late again. This is frustrating to me. This is, you know, and so I had to really check myself and say, like, what's going on here? Let's talk about this. Do we need to adjust a schedule? Do we need to find a better way, like a better route to work? Like, what does this look like? So, yeah, I think, like you said, Abby, checking yourself and being able to like take that moment to say what's really going, like ask questions and get curious.
I love that. Get curious. That's the key. Instead of judging, get curious. And Skylar, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of that stuff. In my department, we do a lot of cross supervision, and so there's a lot of people who might be under my direct supervision that work with other supervisors or that in spaces with other supervisors similar to like UASP. And one thing that we are working on this semester is what we call like diagnostics. And so conversations that we've had reoccurring like time management or professionalism, getting another supervisor to have a conversation with that student employee just to see if their styles or their communication works better. So for example, you know, I'm a very people person, very, you know, mindset that way. I utilize our conversations to work on values, work on, you know, what they need. And that might work better with somebody who's like that as opposed to task orientated. And so we're really trying to focus on, you know, strength and, you know, positives in terms of that, in terms of how we manage our student employees.
That's a great approach. I like that. I like that you have the flexibility to do that. That's great. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's like we have one working learner and there's one person supervising them. So if they happen to have different work styles, they end up having to just compromise. And so, of course, if you work in our office, we're going to be talking about this stuff all the time. That's what we do for a living. So we have those conversations with our working learners. I have an example if no one else has an example of this situation. So the student employee was going to be working on a big project. So they had their regular duties. They have done this for over a year, I think, and they had their regular duties and they did a great job. Everything was fine, but this project was coming up. So I started taking away some of their regular duties. And I felt like I said, I'm taking away this because you're going to be working on this project. And finally, one day that the student brought me aside and was crying and said, "Are you going to fire me?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what? No, you're doing a great job." And they said, "But you keep taking my duties away." So underneath the surface, they had been thinking in their head, I'm going to be fired. And then I found out, I asked some questions. I'm like, "What's going on?" Because I certainly didn't mean to give you that impression. And they said that a significant other had just been laid off. So you don't know, right? Get curious. So I'm glad I asked what's going on, because then I found out there was other stressors involved, but that had caused them to feel like they might get laid off, fired. So just an interesting story of where you just don't know what's under the surface. You got to keep those lines of communication open. All right. So what would we do about it? Let's say you have a working learner who's the get it right kind. They want the details perfect, and they're going to beat themselves up, unfortunately, if those details aren't right. So what are some strategies you could use, even if you're not in that quadrant, if you're not the get it right, but you know they are, and you see there might be a little stressed? What are some strategies you could use to help them out, knowing that that's their style? I'll give you a hint. Oh, I was on the wrong quadrant. Darn it. Okay, back to the other quadrant, the get it done quadrant. If you have a working learner who's very focused on tasks and getting things done, you notice they're under pressure, they're under stress, what you want to do is focus on the task with them and point out those accomplishments. Yeah, we got that done. Look at that. Check that off the list. Yes. And keep everything short and sweet. To, don't, let's have a conversation about, no, they don't want to have a conversation about it. They just want to know what's the next task that I need to get done. So that's how you can adapt to their style. So even if you're in the get along quadrant and your working learner is in the get it done quadrant, you can adjust a little bit to help them, especially under times of pressure when the styles really come out a lot stronger, by saying, good job, you got that done. Check that off the list. How about oh, I already clicked. So on the be perfect quadrant, as I like to call it, get it right. Some things you can do is focus on the task, document how they achieved it, got it done. And if they're ever stressed out, don't tell me to feel better and calm down, because I'm not going to do that. I want to get it perfect. And so it's funny to watch an interaction where someone's being a perfectionist because they like those details to be right. And someone tries to tell them, it's okay. It doesn't matter. No one's going to notice. It'll be fine. That never works with a perfectionist, right? If they're under stress and they want the details right, just do what you can do to support them to get those details right. Trying to tell them not to worry about it, oh, that's the worst. Don't ever say that to me when I'm under pressure. So it's the same with our working learners. And now maybe later on, you could have a conversation about, wow, I noticed you got really stressed. What was happening there? Was it important that all those details be met for that? You could have that conversation later to try and have that life lesson. But in the moment when someone's stressed, don't go there. What about the get along people? Am I missing stuff in chat while I'm going on and on?
We just had another example. Nix had shared that an example of a working learner from the previous slide, Kristen, but then also for the strategies was just saying to give your working learner a soft stop. So if you know that the task can't be completed in the time that they have left on their shift, helping them have a soft stop so that they do feel like they've completed the project, and acknowledging it's okay that you didn't get it done during your shift, we can pick up next time type thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. And emphasize what you did get done. If they're a get it done kind of person, emphasize, look what we did accomplish. This is great. And tomorrow, you know what? Let's make a plan. We'll do this, this, and this. A soft stop. I like that. What about the get along student, the working learner? You can tell they're a little worried. They're thinking people aren't maybe interacting as positively as they hoped. Someone in this group said that you're in the get along quadrant. What can we do to support you if we notice you're a little stressed? How can I support your style? And if it's not your style, what would you think might be a good thing to say?
I think that I fall a little bit on the get along side. And if I'm understanding it correctly, Kristen, this is one that I just need you to communicate with me and just be very transparent and honest and straightforward with what you're needing from me.
Communicate, communicate, communicate. That's what they need. Absolutely. They want you to be, oh, I gave away all my answers, but be friendly, communicate, show emotion. It's okay for the get along person for you to say, oh, I can tell that I'm really tired right now, for example, and then you can get them talking. How are you feeling? So all kinds of feelings conversations can really help someone in this quadrant. Like Abby said, she wants to know how everyone's doing. That's okay to have that conversation. It supports her. And in our final quadrant, I gave it away. But that was the example of my coworker who was very animated and raising her voice in a positive way. Give them that energy back. That's what they need in that moment. So if you have a very energetic working learner and they're a little stressed, share that energy with them. They actually appreciate that because that's what they want to hear, that others are noticing, that others are valuing their contributions. So get a little more animated and give them a little bit of that energy back They will love it, and they love recognition. Some of us don't. Some of us in the more passive side of the quadrants are like, thanks for the thank you, but could you just email it? But those on the more active side, aggressive, assertive, whatever you want to call it, love to be acknowledged, especially publicly if they're in the get appreciated quadrant. I thought I saw something in the chat, so I'm checking. I have trouble with my mouse. Yeah, taking time to connect with the get along for sure. All right. Any other examples out there before we go on?
I think also just kind of ebbing and flowing with your own like strategy. I know that with my working learners, I like to check in with them sometimes, like when they start their shift. If you know that they are more of a focus on the task, sending them a Slack instead of like an in-person face. And flipping that, if you're like, oh, the get along type, seeing them in person, saying, hey, you know, I'm doing great, all is good. No worries about reading into what the Slack message means, or trying to double code like, oh, what does my supervisor mean on that?
That is a great example. Yeah. If they're on the get along side or the social side, on the people oriented scale, they want to see your face. They want to hear your voice. But if they're not, they just want a quick little message. I love that. That's very, a wise supervisor will pay attention to that to get the best out of their team. Very cool. Okay, so let's see. I just wanted to throw out there that if you're wondering, well, how do I start these conversations? Well, one, I'm going to provide you with an assessment. Well, Abby is. I'll send it to her and she'll send you a quick assessment that people can use to kind of determine what quadrant they're in. If you're going to do that, just a tip from me, you want to give them the assessment and then kind of give an explanation. Hey, I went to a workshop. It was kind of cool. It was about the different ways people work on a team. I thought we should try it. Take it home, think it over, and then we'll work on it next time. You don't want to just give them the assessment and say, can you take that right now, please? And we'll add up the scores. People, you know, are like, what is this? Why am I being assessed? So, you know, ease it to it. And then if you do the assessment, you don't have to. You could also just use these kind of phrases that we have here on the screen. You know, hey, I noticed that when you send me information, it's really short, little short snippets and bullet points. That's great. Just so you know, my style is a little bit different. I tend to make my emails kind of long. I might overkill it a little bit, just so you know. It's just a difference between us that I've noticed. So that's the way you could start that conversation, or you could focus it on yourself and say, hey, I know we just started working together, so I wanted to tell you something about me. Email is not something I'm going to respond to right away. So if it's urgent, I would definitely Slack me. Slack tells me that you need a response right away. What about you? What's your preferred style? So that's another way to get the conversation started. And I don't know, Abby, do you have any other examples of kind of getting to know?
An example from my previous role, I am a very outgoing person. I will sit there and talk to anybody and everybody. And those of you on the call, I'm sure you've picked up on that by now, but I have always been that way. And so when I started supervising students, they all picked up on that very quickly. And I had one student who would always come and hang out in my office, even if they were not working. They'd be in between classes. They would, you know, be done with class for the day, but not ready to go home. So they would just stop by my office and hang out. I was totally okay with that until it was becoming an everyday occurrence. And they weren't picking up on the fact that I, you know, had work to do. And like, now's not really the time to chat. But to me, that was a hard conversation to have, because I was like, well, I don't want you to feel like you can't come to me anymore. I want you to still feel comfortable and be able to come talk to me if you need to. But like, I do need to get my work done. So like Kristen, in that second example, you know, we have different styles. Yes, I am an outgoing person. I would love to chat with you more, but just being aware of, you know, hey, I might have to say, now's not the time, come back in an hour. It's not because I'm upset. It's not because I don't care. It's because I have tasks that I also need to get done. And after I said that, they immediately were like, well, yeah, of course, Abby, just tell me to leave. And I'm like, wow, it was really that simple the whole time. So again, just being able to, yes, the conversations might be difficult or kind of awkward at first, but again, explaining yourself, having the student explain themselves will just, in the end, make for a happy work environment and a closer team, if you will.
And I was just thinking that we're helping them in their future careers and their jobs after ASU. If they've learned these kind of how to work with other skills, how to have these conversations from you, if you've demonstrated it, they're going to pick up on that and be able to use it in their next job, which is a great thing about the Working Learners Program, Work Plus.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristen, for that plug.
Last but not least, I just wanted to say, and I think I've made this pretty clear, we want to, if we notice a difference, the last thing we want to do is judge. But the truth is, our brains will automatically go there. It's just a natural part of human beings. We look at situations because we're trying to protect ourselves, and we see something that's different from us, and we immediately judge. That's going to happen. It's okay. What you want to do, though, is stop yourself. Like, see, that person was judging. He was thinking, oh, she is so unprofessional, or this working learner is out of control. Instead of going down that route, change it to being curious. As someone said earlier, change it to, it's a different style. Now, sometimes there are behaviors that we need to stop right away because they're not okay for the office or for the professionalism situation. But I'm talking more about just style differences. And you want to stop and ask, how can I adapt to this? Or how could I talk about this with the working learner? Change it into questions instead of judgments. That really helps get past work style differences. And by the way, just a plug for my office, we talk a lot about getting along with your coworkers or your colleagues. The same rule applies. So if there's that one person that when you see them in the Zoom meeting, you're like, oh no, instead of doing the oh no, think, they have a different style than me. What could I do to help the situation? Could I have a conversation with them? Or could I just adapt a little bit and recognize that they're different? So watch the judging. It's going to happen, but then you can move past it. Last but not least, a quick plug. If this kind of topic really interests you, and now you're wanting to get to know more about different work styles or communication styles, so many options in LinkedIn Learning for you as an employee. And then Abby.
And then also just a reminder, our working learners as student employees at ASU, they all also have access to the LinkedIn Learning courses. So again, as I was mentioning during Work Plus time, if you are building that into your working learner schedule, but they've already been in the pathway for weeks at this point in this month, then maybe encourage them to get into a LinkedIn Learning. I know one of my students, she asked me if she could do a LinkedIn Learning. She was like, I really need to know more about Excels for the career I'm trying to get into. And I don't know anything about Excels and the formulas that I can use for it. She's like, do you think I could use 35 minutes today to do a LinkedIn Learning? Of course, by all means, because then of course, as you complete those, that's showing as a certificate on your LinkedIn page and future employers are going to see that. And so absolutely, if your students aren't aware, please make it a point to tell your students that they all have access to LinkedIn Learning. Kristen, I'm sure you know there's thousands and thousands of different courses on that LinkedIn Learning. If you haven't done it yourself, I encourage you to. I try to do it at least once, twice a month. Again, if we're telling our students the importance of professional development and taking the time to grow professionally, we should all be doing the same, which you all being here today is showing me that you are taking the point to do that. So again, thank you for being here today. I didn't mean to wrap that up like that, but.
That's okay. I just want to point out it's LinkedIn Learning through Career Edge that is free to our student employees. So if they just go to LinkedIn Learning, they might be asked to pay for and join. Don't go that way. They need to go through My ASU and then click on Career Edge and then click on LinkedIn Learning. So that's how they can get access to those free courses. And we are at the end. Comments, questions, thoughts. Okay, I'll ask a question. What's your one takeaway? You can put it in the chat. Based on our conversation today, What's one thing you're going to do or try with your working learners?
Getting some good responses in the chat.
Yep. Just using the social styles model and yeah, that assessment. Yeah, we don't have to treat everybody the same. We need to treat people fairly. But if we know they have a different style, we can certainly adapt a little bit for them.
Ooh, Leah, I'm with you. I'm excited to see what my people think they are compared to what I think they are, to see how well that goes.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your takeaways. We appreciate it. And if you have comments or thoughts later about what we could do to improve this, share them with Abby or Calissa. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and we're so glad that both Kristen and Abby were able to come and talk to us. I know I learned a lot, and I'm excited to talk about it with my working learners. And then I just wanted to put a plug in for our next event, which will be happening on March 16th from 10 to 11. And Abby is actually going to take us through a skill survey and go through all the ins and outs of that so that you can better understand and work with your working learners through skill survey. But other than that, we are so glad that you guys were able to join us this morning and hope that you have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.